Nancy Ward. Her Cherokee name was Nanehi, which is the Cherokee way of saying Nancy. She was a Gigal, which is the beloved woman of the Cherokee. The Cherokee had high respect for women. One of the things that flabbergasted Europeans, who were a very paternalistic and chauvinistic society at that time, was how the Indians allowed the women in council and women to help make decisions. The Cherokee were also a matrilineal society, whereas the children were descended from their mother's side of the family, and that's where they inherited their name and their identity and stuff like that. So they had great respect for the women, and the women that were the highest in the council, the highest of all were called beloved women, the Gigals, and they had enormous influence in councils and things like that. One of the major things that they could do is when the men took captives in war, one of the common things to do in revenge and stuff was to burn the captives at the stake. The beloved women had the power to go in amongst all these warriors and rescue the captive if they so chose. And Nancy Ward gained a lot of notoriety because she was all for peace. All the time, all these terrible wars and things were going on. And you think about the wars out west with the Indians, with the Plains Indians, that's what most people know about from the cowboy movies and things like that. That was kindergarten compared to what went on here in the East. By the time European settlement had got west, our numbers, the white people's numbers, were so much greater, and the weaponry was so much greater, organization was so much greater. Even though the Indians put up some good fights, I still celebrate Little Bighorn Day, June 25th, when Custer got his butt wiped. But, those were exceptions, and they were pretty much doomed from the outset. Here in the East, the question for centuries was touch and go. It was inevitable just because of the numbers of the Europeans coming in and stuff, but the Indians won conflict after conflict. They would clear whole areas from settlement with massacres and things like that, trying to get their lands back. So it was much, much bloodier. And the Indians compared very favorably. The whites' weaponry was not so great. By the time they could shoot a musket, an Indian could shoot 7 arrows. And their bows were so strong that a lot of the white people couldn't even pull them back all the way. And yet the Indians were quite strong and accustomed to that. And, the Indians had all the wood skills and things like that. It wasn't until some of the whites coming along developed those skills themselves, like Daniel Boone and Simon Kenton and things like that they could even begin to compare and fight with the Indians on similar ground. But Nancy Ward hated war. She fought against it constantly. And it was very ironic because her cousin, Dragon Canoe, was the war chief, the head war chief of the Cherokees, and he was constantly fighting against the whites. So they were in conflict constantly. Somehow it didn't disrupt the family. She did what she did. She was all for peace and going and squealing and telling the whites a raid was getting ready to happen and saving people, and he was all for massacring them right and left and driving them out of the area. And they got along. They never hated each other or anything like that. They just each went their separate way and did their separate things. But she saved captives from being burned to the stake. She warned settlers when raids were going to happen so they could get into forts and protect them. She did all kinds of things like that. And she was born in 1738, lived to 1822. She lived to be a very old woman. And at the end, she had married a Scottish fellow. They had a hotel. And it's down, what county is that? Tennessee. It's just before you get to Georgia. It's off 411. Her grave is there. If you're driving down through Georgia toward Georgia on 411, they'll have signs there, and you can go to Nancy Ward's grave. Her son, Five Killer, which I have a book about him here with some great art in it, is buried there too. But anyway, she died before the removal, and the fact that she had married a white person and they had private property, she probably would not have been shipped west, but you never know about that. Anyway, Dragon Canoe, her cousin, is another person I want to talk about.